Well, if there was a lesson I was going to miss, it's probably be the one to miss. Get somebody to fill in, teach about raising teenagers. Because we just started. And as I stated at the very first introductory class, obviously I'm in the midst of raising children. All of you know that. And so those of you who have raised teenagers, okay, share your wisdom with us, the good and the bad with us to help those of us who are still bringing up our children who are maybe not yet teenagers and some that are. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Hindsight is 20/20. And so, again, there'll be some like Francis, Damon, and others here that are older that have already raised teenagers, and now many of them have their own families, can help us out who are younger. Damon, you're going to say something?
Yeah, homeschool them and don't let them out of the house. Separated from the world, and then you'll be fine in the teenage years, and then you have to deal with them in the college years.
Oh, okay.
Just a way of putting it out.
Completely shelter them. All right. Appreciate it. Such good advice right off the bat. Okay, well, thank you, Norm P., for covering last Wednesday when we were in Florida. And it's hard to believe today marks 1 year anniversary. We arrived December 1st, 2020. And it happened to be Jason's birthday, and it happens to be Jason's birthday again today. But that time last year was a Tuesday, and this fell on a Wednesday. But as we reflect on that year that's already gone by, we're very thankful, and we're blessed to be here with you. Let's go to God in prayer. All right. So, raising teenagers in the way of God. Go to our first question. What are some things that parents can do to prepare for the teen years? What can we do? Not just to arrive and wake up one day and, I have a teenager, but back over here, what's some preparation we can be doing? Julie? You know, as I was answering that, and I had a lot of answers down, and then that kind of hit me upside the head as I have it in caps on my notes now. Pray. I mean, of course, we always need to devote ourselves to prayer, period, as Christians, but prayer, seeking God's, as we just did in our prayer, seeking God's wisdom throughout our parenting, but also as we approach and then we're in the midst of raising up teenagers, young people in the Lord. We want to seek God's wisdom. If anyone lacks wisdom, what does James say? Let him ask of God, right? James 1:5, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. And so we need to seek God's wisdom. We need to seek the knowledge of God's word and be filled with it. But pray for strength, pray for guidance, pray for courage, pray for resolve and determination, because those years can be very challenging, right? Those can be some of the most challenging years, and for some parents I speak to that, those years were, I don't know if they say it was a breeze, but that it just went really well. But that may be the blessing with the disposition of the child and the heart of the child, but it probably also had a lot to do with what they did before they got to the teen years as well. Okay, Francis?
They've got to understand that they don't get to do everything they want to do. They got to understand those rules. They have to understand that they need to fear God, because they need to realize that they're going to answer to Him one day, even when they're young. That way, when they're at teenage years, it's been there for a while.
Okay. So you said a number of things there. I'm going to grab a few of them, and maybe I didn't catch everything, but one of the things I know you said was you got to start young, right? You got to start at the beginning. Train up a child. Let's say train up a teenager the way he should go. Yeah, we need to do that, but you start back here. Train up a child in the way he should go. You need to set rules. And really, children not only need that, they really want that. whether they would acknowledge it or admit that. You think about children who are raised in homes or that's not really a home, that really don't have good parenting. Maybe they don't have both parents. Maybe it's just bad parenting, but they don't have the rules. They don't have the parameters. They don't have the guidelines and the structure. And when we give that to our children from the beginning, it's not a surprise when we shouldn't be when we get the teenage rules that no, we've had these rules and expectations for behavior and attitude from an early age and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so it shouldn't be a news flash once we get to this age that all of a sudden, we're going to do things differently or start teaching you about respect. You mentioned fearing God, and that's one of the things we certainly is so key, of course, is the whole duty of man. Solomon says at the end of Ecclesiastes, fear God, keep his commandments, and that God's going to bring every work into judgment, right? Into account. And so we need to teach our children to treat others with respect, right? Teach them to respect others. And if we're doing that with teaching them to respect us, right? Ephesians 6, verse 2, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise that it may be well with you, that you may live long upon the earth. Ephesians 6, 2 and 3. And so to teach them at a very early age, you need to listen to us. You need to show respect and how you speak, your tone of voice, even facial expressions, even without words, facial expressions, right, can show disrespect or disdain or anger or what have you, rolling of the eyes or whatever it may be. And those are things we have to correct each time those things happen where it's being disrespectful. And so teach them to respect father and mother. Teach them to honor father and mother. Teach them to respect their siblings, vice versa. Teach them to respect their teachers in school, those in authority. Teach them to show respect for those who are older and the elderly, etc. And most importantly, as Francis said, teach them to respect, reverence God. Yeah. And so again, when we get to teenage years, you have that foundation already that they have been taught day after day, year after year, before they hit 13, 14, 15, 16, the respect that they are expected to show and demonstrate. Francis?
They have to see examples, parenting. If you are setting them a good example, then they can understand the method and the reaction and how everything works, because if they see you doing something that you're telling them not to do, then that's not going to help them that much.
Okay.
And then, like I told my son, we turned 18. Tomorrow, you might be 18, but you're just one day older than today. You don't just grow up from wherever, and when you turn 18, you've learned everything in that night.
Okay, so appreciate that, Francis. Another thing that Francis just emphasized is setting the right example, right? They need to see in us that we're doing right, living right, how we treat our spouse, kind of going back to that first lesson, how strong marriage really makes for strong parenting, should. But what they see in how the father treats the mother, and the mother treats the father, the husband, and the kind of example that we're setting for them. Again, all part of laying that foundation for years that can be very challenging in our parenting, teenage years. Okay, Shirley?
I've said this before, but I think you need to get to know their friends so that you can kind of guide them better, and have them into your home and know who they're with and all that. And I think that goes a long ways.
Yeah.
Because, teenagers have a tendency to get to the point where they think they know more than their parent.
Really?
So, you have to say, I've been there, I know what you're going through.
Right.
And so you need to listen.
All right, so you touched on at least a couple of things I want to respond to. One of them, I'm not going to get a lot into it because our final lesson's going to be focused on helping guide our our children with their choice of companions. And that's going to touch on friends, and that's going to touch on dating, and every date is a potential mate. And so that's going to be a focus of our final lesson. But even early on, even when they're small children, it matters who their friends are. It matters who their companions are. And those kind of, those kind of relationships and those kind of patterns very well are going to lead into the teenage years of who they want to be around. And sometimes we have lifelong friends, or those ones we connected with when we're small children. We continue to be friends. And we might have to break off some of those friendships because some of those friends might go in a direction that we can't go down. And so we need to be there to help guide them with that. And Shirley, you going to say something?
I think you need to be involved in what they're interested in. I mean, my children were, I was, the Girl Scout leader. My girls when they were younger. And when they got a little older, when they got in the band, I chaperoned. But I made a point when I chaperoned that I didn't ride the bus that my children rode in. I told them, I said, I wasn't there to watch them. I know what they needed to do, and they know what they needed to do. I was there to watch the others. So, you know, I think you need to be involved in whatever sport or band or whatever, and go with them places. You know, I went to Florida with the camp. I went to Myrtle Beach with the camp. Walked alongside them with a girl. Spray water in their face to keep them from falling out because it was so hot, you know. So you need to be involved in what they're involved in.
Okay. So yeah, this kind of sums up all that you just said. Be involved in what your children are involved in, whether that's Girl Scouts or Scouts, whether that's sports, whether that's band. Being there, involved, knowing what's going on, chaperoning, as you said, maybe not so much for their sake as it is for those that are going to be around, and be there to be able to help and guide them with those things. Right.
So that's why I made a point of riding a different bus, you know, to let them know that I trust what they did. But I still wanted to be there in the midst of what's going on, so if anything did happen, I would know.
Okay. All right. Norbit? Point at somebody? Oh, okay, go ahead.
I 100% agree with Shirley because my parents were very involved throughout our activities, Avery and I. And we didn't see it as an intrusion. It was very welcomed. We just thought they had a genuine interest in what we were doing, and they did. But even into college, I mean, if there was an event, I would definitely tell my mom or dad about it, and they would show up. And it could be a sorority event. It could have been anything. They did. And it's a good place to just check in. Even though your kid is away at college, they're still a teenager there. And you can get eyes on them.
Okay. So just complimenting basically what Shirley said, and experiencing that, appreciating that, and seeing the value and importance of that. Norm P.
In preparation for the teen years, it's having a clear vision as a parent in your mind as to what kind of adult you want your child to be. Having that goal, having that vision in mind is key to understanding, because then at that point you just look at God's word. What do I need to do to get there? And if you do that when they're young, when they're buddy's age, and you imagine this is what kind of son I want to have when he's 18, 19, 20 years old. He's going to be a man. What kind of man do I want to be? And with my girls, what kind of ladies do I want my girls to be? And I started young, and everything that I've done has led to, I need to move in this area, guide them that way, because there's an end goal I have in mind as to who do I want them to be like, what I want them to be like. And without that, you're going to have a very hard time in teen years when they start deciding their own things. They start getting independence, because where you want them to be and where they are may be too far apart.
Okay. Well said. Appreciate it. Todd?
I think it's helpful well before they're teenagers that you've set expectations for what they can expect when they're teenagers. Like, if you're not going to let them go to dances because of the dangers there, well, you don't let them go to the things that kind of come before dances, like the middle school type events that are going to lead to the high school proms later. So they can get used to being the one who doesn't get to go. It's hard to change those rules later when things get more racy or whatever.
Right.
Same thing with, missing church services for whatever. If you're gonna try to stick to it when they're teenagers, when they feel like they have some independence and want to make their own decisions, get them used to it when they're young. That I have to miss that game or that scouting trip or whatever because we're setting priorities now.
Okay. So, don't wait to teach on morality and why we don't go to certain activities or school functions. Don't wait for the more challenging events as they get older and all their friends are going, and there's the maybe some of the desire and the peer pressure and to fit in and to go and to do those fun things. You've already been teaching them those principles of godliness and the problems with those worldly activities. And the other thing you said after that was what? Again, remind me.
I was talking about the dances.
No, after that. Priorities. Priorities, yeah, sports, priorities. Yeah. And teaching them at an early age that God always comes first. Worshiping, assembling with the saints always comes before these other things that are not spiritual activities. Robert?
I think going back just a minute to what Norm said about pushing our kids, our teenagers, towards where we want them to be, another part of that is the examples we have them around. I know I can give you a sizable list of men that my parents put me around that I to this day will tell you were part of me being who I am today. They were good men. They were my friends' fathers. I wasn't just exposed to my friends, but my parents were involved in my life, and I was involved in my friends' life to a point where their parents were parts of my life. And so those people mattered, who I spent time with, to a point where some of my absolute closest friends, even to this day, were my friends' parents because of the level of comfort and trust I put in them and the examples they gave to me to him today. So that in itself is an extremely important part of what we want to mold children to be, is giving them examples besides ourselves of what it looks like.
Yeah, well said. So being around other godly individuals, godly families, and spending time with those kinds of people. That's what our children need to be around. Yes, hopefully we're being godly and setting the right example, but they see that in other families, and not just, as you said, friends your age, but also their parents, and the impact and influence that had on you in a positive way. All right. Anyone else? So, again, what are some things parents can do to prepare for the teen years? We need to get behavior under control early. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 18 says, "Chasten your son while there is hope, and do not let your soul spare for his crying." While there's hope, again, early on, chasten him promptly or diligently, as we studied earlier in our lessons. But molding the behavior of a child must begin in the early years, and definitely not waiting to try to mold that behavior once they become teenagers. Because if a parent doesn't have control of the child by the teenage years, then turbulent times are ahead, for sure. One of the things that we touched upon already is be an example to your children. Children often turn out to be just like their parents. In Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 44, Ezekiel 16, verse 44, "Indeed, everyone who quotes Proverbs will use this proverb against you, like mother, like daughter." like father, like son, too, right? But again, the point is, children often turn out to be just like their parents. They learn as much or more by what they see as by what they're told. And so parents should be an example of what they want their children to be. Another point, and a number of these points I'm sharing come from a book you have. Hopefully, most of you have at least, God's Plan for Parenting, Raising Teenagers. This is Donnie Rader's lesson, which is lesson 8, beginning on page 36. And so, get behavior under control early, teach them to respect others. Don't teach or allow things you must correct or change later. Okay, think about that. Don't teach or allow things that you must correct or change later. Now, there can be a lot of application to that, but one of the points that Todd made earlier was with some of these school functions or maybe dances early on, and you let them go to some of these things, and then here comes the prom, and you're dealing with that. You're going to have a much bigger problem on your hands. Remember that little children grow up. There's another point he makes. Sometimes when children reach the teen years, parents are not willing to admit their children are growing up. It's easy to think of the 15 or 16-year-old as if he is still 10 or 12. When that is the case, the parents tolerate more than he should. And develop communication. One of our later questions are going to touch on these last 2 points. Develop communication, commend and encourage. But develop communication. Parents cannot fulfill their obligations found in Ephesians 6, 1 through 4 without communicating with their children. What are those obligations? Well, teaching them to obey you, teaching them to honor, bringing them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. All those things discussed there in Ephesians 6, 1 through 4. Can't do that, can't fulfill those obligations unless we're effectively communicating with our children. Developing communication must start at an early age so that when we have teens, we can keep that going. It's not something unusual. It's already a regular part of family life. Communication, of course, involves both listening and talking. And that's a point I think Shirley made earlier about listening. Listen. And then commend and encourage. We should not provoke children to wrath, but rather train them in the way of the Lord. Part of doing that would involve commending children when they do well and encouraging them in the right things. All too often, parents are quick to let their children know when they have done wrong, but say little or nothing when they do well. How sad for children to grow up not having heard either of their parents commend them. And so I kind of italicize that, even though I could bold that. All too often, parents are quick to let their children know when they have done wrong, but say little or nothing when they do well. And so I emphasize that for my sake. Maybe you need that emphasized also as you think of your parenting with your children. Obviously, we need to correct wrong behavior, bad behavior, but if that's all we're ever doing and they're not getting any positive from our parenting, any commending, any encouraging, that's obviously going to discourage them greatly. Okay. All right, anything else to add, number one, before we move on? Okay. Number two, while teenagers should enjoy the days of their youth, what do parents need to make sure they are mindful of during this period of their life? So let's go to Ecclesiastes, please. Chapter 11. Ecclesiastes 11. And the next number of questions do pertain to the text found here. Ecclesiastes 11, and we're going to read, let's read 9 through the first verse of chapter 12. Bonnie, why don't you do verse 9, and Todd, verse 10, and the first verse of chapter 12, please.
Rejoice, young man,
heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood, and follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes. Yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things.
So remove grief and anger from your heart and put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them.
Okay. So you look back at verse 9, and the wise man Solomon does say to young people, rejoice in your youth. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Enjoy that time, right? And we should, and they should. God wants us to. And that doesn't mean, obviously, enjoy it by getting involved in things that are immoral and ungodly in His sight. Obviously, that's not what Solomon is saying, but to just enjoy that time of your life. It is an exciting time. It is a time that should be, in many ways, bring us joy and happiness. But with that said, what do we need to make sure our young people, our children, our teenagers are still mindful of during that period in their life? What does Solomon say? But know what? Enjoy yourself, have a good time. However, Okay. But know that for all these, God will bring you into judgment. Okay? And again, Solomon's not saying go sow your wild oats, right? That's not what the Bible teaches. Just, kids are going to do that. Young people are going to do that. You're going to have to go sow your wild. No, you don't have to do that. You don't need to do that. We want to be training our children so they don't make those kind of foolish decisions. Those paths are very dangerous and destructive to them. So that's not what Solomon's saying here, sow your wild oats. He's saying enjoy your youth and have fun and those sort of things, but you need to keep in mind, for all these things, all those things you're doing in this period of your life, you're going to have to give an account to God. God's going to bring you into judgment for that. In fact, very next chapter, how does he end the book? Verse 14 of chapter 12, for God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And so, why is it important, do you think, that we remind our teenagers of this fact, this truth? Why do you think that's important? Marissa?
That they do in their youth can have consequences throughout the rest of their life. The jobs that they choose to take, behaviors that are not appropriate, the choice of mate, all of those can have consequences that last throughout the rest of their life and have consequences not only here but eternally.
Okay, so that's very sobering, isn't it? At a very young age, we can really mess up our lives. We can do a lot of damage that's not only for the rest of our lives, can echo into eternity, right? And so these are loving admonitions, stern warnings, but very, very clear in our parenting as we teach them about God. Yes, He's a loving God, but you need to consider you're accountable, you're responsible, you're going to give an answer to your Creator, and so you need to weigh your decisions very carefully in life. Even a moment's decision can have ramifications for the rest of your life, whether that's a career choice, who you begin to date and then marry, for sure, choice, a moment of passion and lust that you give into, and all the ramifications and consequences that will come from those kind of decisions, right? So it will help them to remember that they're accountable to God. In Hebrews chapter 4 and in verse 13, Hebrews 4 and 13, we read, and there is no creature hidden from His sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of Him to whom we must give account. Also, reminding them of this will help them to keep an eternal perspective. okay? Not just the here and now, but the future. And it will help them hopefully to carefully weigh the decisions before making rash and foolish choices, and that there are consequences to behavior. There's a reward, but there's also punishment. Remember what Paul said in the book of Galatians in chapter 6 and verses 7 and 8. Galatians 6, verses 7 and 8, do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. Of course, we just returned from Florida. While we were there, this is a place where I preached for about 5 years, and so it's always good to see brethren that you worked with. And I was talking to one of the ladies that are around my mother's age and asking how her sons were doing, and she says, well, don't ask. And I knew she meant the younger one. And the younger one's just a little bit older than me. But because of some very foolish decisions he made when he was younger, of companions he hung out with, smoking, then beginning to take drugs, here he is, about a 50-year-old man, and he's in and out of prison and still struggling with drug addiction. And we all know people, whether it's in our family, extended family, or other friends that we grew up with, or children who were children of members of the church, such as this example, that because he sowed to the flesh, he continues to reap the whirlwind in his life. And it's so sad. And of course, her heart's broken over it all, time and time again. But again, here's wise Solomon saying, yeah, enjoy your youth, but you better keep this in mind. And we need to do that with our children. April.
Youth does not ensure longevity. Any time our lives could be snatched away from us, or the judgment day could come, and not only are there consequences for our actions when we're young, but also we don't know what tomorrow holds. Car accidents, illness. Even young people. I think a lot of times we might have this idea that, oh, I'm only 17, I have a life ahead of me, but you may not.
Yeah, and you can feel maybe you're rather invincible. I don't know if that's maybe too strong of a word, but I'm young and I'm strong, and that may be true that you're young and you're strong and you're healthy, but life can be over just like that, as we're reminded on a regular daily basis, whether that's a car accident or whatever tragedy may be, a school shooting, again in the news, tragically, innocent people gunned down, parents grieving right now. And so we need to remind our young people, our children, about how precious life is, how valuable and sacred life is, but again, how uncertain it is. And they need to, again, keep that in mind as they're making choices and decisions as they get older, that they make wise ones with God and His will always in mind. Okay. I appreciate that. Was there other comments, Jason?
What April said is exactly what I was thinking, but I'm afraid that sometimes parents need to be reminded of that. I think that sometimes parents feel like their kids are invincible. And I can tell you from experience, for me personally, I felt like I was invincible and didn't think that anything bad was going to happen to me or my family. And I think parents can get that mindset as well. And to this day, I'm open with my kids, and if they ask a question, I'll tell them if I'm alive, or even if you're alive. I let them know if it's possible that maybe something happens and you're not going to be alive for whatever this is that we're talking about. And death can come to any of us and all of us at any point. So as parents, we need to make sure that we're always mindful of that as well.
Okay, appreciate that. Both sides of that. All of us need to have that perspective. Okay. Anything else? Question 3, this is from, as you see, the New American Standard Bible, the 1995 edition. Ecclesiastes 11, verse 10 reads, "So remove grief and anger from your heart, and put away pain," some versions read, "or evil, from your body. Put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting." So just from that scripture, from that passage, what 3 pieces of advice does the wise man give young people in the first part of verse 10? Well, he says, remove grief from your heart, or remove sorrow is how the New King James Version reads. This, in the New American Standard Bible, reads also, remove anger from your heart. And the third thing is, put away pain, or put away evil, it says, from your body. Now, we're going to have some follow-up questions that touch on these 3 points. And what reason does Solomon give for this advice in the final statement? Because why? Because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting, right? Goes back quickly, don't it? Right. And so this is from Wilson Adams' book on co-parenting with God, and on chapter 11, the tough teen years is how he entitles that lesson. But he says they only have one prime of life, and it doesn't last long. What they do today will be the memories they make for tomorrow. As parents, let's help them be able to look back on these youthful years and know they enjoyed life and had fun, they didn't get carried away, and they stayed accountable before God. And then in parentheses, he has Ecclesiastes 12, verse 1, "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult or evil days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them." Okay. Thoughts or comments right here before we move on, Todd?
Youth is wasted on the young. That's what this verse makes me think of, that, a lot of times elderly, they see the young people and, they want you to enjoy that time and recognize how precious that time is, because in our younger years, we tend to be, you wouldn't have this advice if people weren't full of grief and full of anger and finding reasons to be feeling pain or whatever while they're young. And it's like, there's a lot of bigger problems coming later. Try not to stress out so much.
Right. And lots of times when we're younger, we just can't wait to get older, right? We can't wait to grow up. I can't wait to get this age and get my license, and we need to continue to do our best to say enjoy these years as a child and as a young person, because it's you don't want to get there too quickly, because it's going to come, Lord willing. But there's a lot more responsibility, a lot more challenges, right, as we get older and older, as we live life upon this earth. Okay, appreciate that. Anything else, Dad? Okay. Question 4, in what ways might our teenager manifest grief and anger, and how should we as parents respond to such? And so that goes back to question 3, where we quoted from the New American Standard Bible, 1995, "So remove grief and anger from your heart." And we're talking about young people here in this context. And so another way maybe to look at this question is, why might our teenagers manifest grief and anger? Okay, what's going on in the teenage years? A lot, right? There's a lot of changes going on in the body, right? There's chemical changes going on in the young man and the young lady that weren't going on back here when they were little kids, but now just the way God made us, those things are happening, right? And the hormones and all those things, and the acne and the peer pressure. That really wasn't an issue when they were 6, but maybe so when they're 16. And why might, again, our teenagers manifest such attitudes of grief and anger, pride can oftentimes begin to develop within a young person's heart that begins to, where's this coming from? Well, welcome to the teenage years. And so there's some challenges there with maybe pride and also a stubborn will. Even though you can have to deal with a young child with a stubborn will, again, you can see that oftentimes in the teenage years. They don't get what they want and when they want it. And so we begin to see these kind of emotions and attitudes being expressed. And so thinking about the grief or the sorrow part, what comes to mind when you think about that? Why might a young person have grief or sorrow in their heart? Marissa?
Are really big for teenagers. They've got a lot going on, and that is exacerbated by school, by work, by expectations from their parents. And not as a parent of a teenager, but as someone who works with teenagers, what I find is most effective is listening.
Okay.
And asking questions, not with an attitude of let me tell you what to do, but of let me be a sounding board, or I have a genuine interest in what is going on.
Okay, well said. We're out of time as I look at the clock. It's 7:45, and I think I saw the hands, but we're going to have to stop there. I hate to stop there. We're right in the middle of it, and it's going to be hard to put us right back in a week, but we'll try to. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your real good comments tonight. Appreciate it.